Hi, my name is Paul Soligan, and I'm the Southeast Area Sales Leader at Amazon Web Services. We are proud to be partnering with TAG this year as the innovation sponsor for the Georgia Technology Summit. We're very excited to sponsor and kick off this session on cybersecurity. You know, the security industry has been attempting to solve cybersecurity problems for a long time, but incorrectly. Meaning, you cannot solve this with your security team alone. It has to come from the top, the CEO and the business leaders, or it will fail. They have to demonstrate that it's important and can't just say, security is everyone's job. People will ignore it. Culture is the most common thing missed, but we at AWS believe it's one of our key differentiators. At AWS, security continues to be top priority year over year. And it's the top concern of our customers when they're moving to the cloud. We see many organizations facing the same challenges in managing security of their on-prem infrastructure, stemming from two reasons. First one is lack of visibility into what resources and data are out there and where it's moving and who's accessing it. And secondly, there's a low degree of automation in remediating key security tasks. This combination comprises an organization's ability to effectively secure their on-prem infrastructure. At AWS, we know the cloud, all this is made a lot easier. It changes the speed of your execution and it allows you to stay agile and elevate your security posture. Our mission at AWS is to innovate on behalf of our customers so they have less work to do and can spend more time building and deploying and rapidly iterating on secure systems. With over 230 security, identity, and compliance features and services, AWS helps take the burden off the manual tasks associated with security so that you can focus on innovating on behalf of your business. And this is where zero trust really comes in. How do we diminish, possibly to zero, the trust that's been created within a traditional network? At AWS, we believe that the underlying security principles and advancing capabilities represent a bar-raising security model for both AWS Cloud and for the environments that our customers build on top of our services. In this session, you're going to hear from a terrific panel of security executives, all who have navigated their own security journeys within their organizations. They will address concerns around cyber threats and give you insights on how to build zero trust. I'd like to welcome Blake Brannon, who's the Chief Technology Officer at OneTrust, who will be moderating today's session, Cybersecurity, Zero Trust, and the Threats. Take it away, Blake.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have a really exciting panel with some great participants that are gonna round out a great discussion for us on zero trust. This is a term many of you probably heard in the news, but let me first, before I jump into some of the content, let me introduce our panel today, and I'll kind of go around as I see everyone here on my screen and let you kind of introduce yourself. But we have, first off, myself, Blake Brannon. I am the CTO at OneTrust. So I oversee building all the products that OneTrust as a company builds. We are an organization that helps organizations be more trustworthy by operationalizing their privacy, compliance, governance programs. So joining me on today's panel is Bob. So Bob, I will let you kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Defense Storm.
Hi, I'm Bob Thibodeau, and Defense Storm is a security services provider for banks and credit unions in the United States. We provide security operations, incident response, and also compliance, GRC-like products to help them comply with auditor recommendations and guidelines. And yeah, I'm the Chief Security Officer there.
Thanks for your time today and joining us. Next, I'll turn it over to Bill from Deluxe. Bill, welcome.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here. Yeah, my name is Bill Altheby. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Deluxe. Deluxe, as you may or may not know, is the original payments company, over 100 years old, where we revolutionized payments by creating the check. But today, we're really a trusted business technology firm that helps small businesses and major financial institutions across payments, electronic payments, cloud services, check still, as well as promotional products. And really happy to be here as part of the talk.
And you have a long history of seeing how all this has evolved then, being a 100-year-old company. So
Yeah, I wasn't there for all the years, but we do have a long history.
good point. And last but definitely not least, Paul from NCR. Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Blake. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Paul Farley. I'm the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer for NCR. Many of you are probably familiar with NCR. NCR has a long legacy, 130 plus years of developing solutions for our customers. And really, before I joined NCR, I didn't realize how many different things we do. So we don't have enough time for me to go through all of them. So I'll say that really we're focused on building solutions to help our customers run their business wall to wall. And we, in the retail, hospitality, and banking space, particularly, are where we focus.
Awesome. Well, welcome to each of you. So I want to set the stage with just a little bit of context, then I'll kind of dish out a couple questions, get everyone's thoughts on this. First off, Zero Trust is a concept that was created by John Kindervag back in 2010. So over a decade ago, when he was a principal analyst at Forrester Research. So it's been around for some time, but I feel like there's this pull in the market where everyone, is talking about it. Could be buzzwordy, but I would love to get everyone's take because I think it means a little bit of something different to each of us. Obviously, we all do different things in terms of products or services we build, what our architecture looks like, and all of that. So what does Zero Trust mean to each of you? And maybe I'll start out with, Bill, maybe we go to you to start with.
Yeah, I think it's a conceptual framework, and it's a conceptual framework of trying to get away from old-fashioned, maybe identity access management at the perimeter, controls at the perimeter, to kind of a different idea of continuous verification of trust.
Good starting point. Paul, how about you?
Sure, I agree with Bill. I put it in a slightly different context. When John coined this, and he really was a visionary, in looking at it when he did, at that time, everybody looked at a firewall, and there's a trusted side and an untrusted side. And so everything on the trusted side was good, and everything on the untrusted side was bad. And so really, Zero Trust is, in effect, taking away that delineation and saying, you know what, we really shouldn't call something all trusted or all untrusted. There's more shades of gray there, and we need to understand what should be able to access what as defined by what we're trying to protect.
Yeah, it's a great point. Bob, anything you care to add there to the definition or the way you think about Zero Trust from your side of the world?
I love Paul's talking about trusted and untrusted. Even today, a major firewall vendor, inside of the firewall itself, you have a trusted zone and an untrusted zone. I mean, the concepts are still there. But I like Microsoft's approach where they just say assume breach. And assume breach is our mantra at DefenseStorm. We monitor networks for banks and credit unions constantly. And we expect every day that we're going to find something in there. I mean, that's our expectation. That's how we work. That's how our threat hunters work. And I think that's a practical approach in this environment.
Yeah, so should not trust anything. One of the things that I think is driving a bit of this coming to life is some of the changing landscape of the evolutions of technology, data at a whole new scale, as we all are doing today, remote working, and things aren't, what does it mean to even be inside the firewall, to use your point anymore? So what are your thoughts on, obviously there are things that are changing, but what are some of the things that you feel like are kind of fueling and accelerating the need to start to think about getting your arms around what you need to be doing from a Zero Trust standpoint?
Well, I'll jump in on that one. To use an analogy, when when the pandemic happened, it's, if we take a castle, when the pandemic hit, we sent all of our villagers out into the village and boarded up the castle and said, "Hope everybody's okay." And we quickly realized that it was hard to get people back inside to do the jobs that had to happen inside the castle. So I think that zero trust is really about, security is about context, and zero trust is about being more refined in how we define that context. John is famous for saying, that talking about trust is anthropomorphizing computers, right? It's a human aspect. And so it's really, the device or the geography, the type of traffic, all of those things need to be factored into should something be permitted, or maybe should, adaptive authentication or things like that be used to ensure that what you're seeing is what you get.
Yeah, so context matters. I think that's a key point for sure. Bill or Bob, any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, this is Bill. I think that was a great one. I really like that. I also think that there's a few other lessons learned. One as recently is work from home in a modern in the past year. I think all of us were talking before we started recording about just what a big shift that was, and how does that change risk. I think if you look at the history of successful attacks over the years, you'll see that it is not as often where you're going to go directly against the companies. You're not going to just try to break in through the firewall. You're going to try to get the easiest point that's exposed to the internet, and that's the end user. You're going to go after the employees any way that you can. So I think if you think about this past year and how we learned from lessons such as massive work from home, but you can also think about how successful attacks quite often pivot from something on the outside to now they look like they're an insider. And if we don't have a good response to detect what, Bob the employee suddenly is not acting like Bob the employee, and how do we contain that employee to the least amount of access they should have? If we don't do that well, we're not learning from previous attacks.
Yeah, I just say that the extension of our instrumentation has to go into a home now. This was a very select group in the past. You had remote workers, handful, maybe hundreds if you have a big company, but you need to get that instrumentation down to the smallest element, and then also have control over those assets. So you have to know you have them too. So
You got to start somewhere. And then, we also think a lot as organizations about agility of, empowering the teams to build and do great things and build new things. And some of the technology is almost created that to be, maybe a little too powerful in terms of things can very quickly go from okay to not okay. Just like I think we were talking before a little bit about the insider risk of, somebody that normally would be assumed is okay, but because of this anomaly or that anomaly, now it's a bad, it's something we shouldn't trust. So what are some of the things you're seeing, whether it's in your organization or just in the industry holistically, that are driving sort of the importance of having good, as you said, Bob, telemetry and response abilities to be able to see that these things have changed or are happening?
Yeah, I think a thing that I see is changing, and it's conceptually a part of zero trust, right? Is how could a small security team, or even think of a really large company, how can even a big security team catch up on just so much data that's feeding into them and actually have a timely response? And again, whether it's an employee trying to do the right thing but making a mistake, and suddenly that mistake is exposed to the world, you can't wait like 3 weeks for some security team to detect that. And I think the way that security teams are continuously getting better, and companies are getting better, is through more and more automation of that detection, and even up to the automation of the response.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think Bill hit on something that I have a lot of passion about, and that is the lowering the dwell time of the bad guys on the networks, right? So over the past 5 years, you can look at the statistics, Verizon DBER report, data breach report, IR report, every year. The dwell time is going down on actors. We're discovering them quicker, but we're still only at like 45 days as an average, which is just, think about how much damage can be done in that time. But reducing dwell time to 0 or to a day or to 10 hours, that's really the goal. And you have to do that with instrumentation and automation in many cases, but also smart people looking at the logs, looking at the data. If you look at the SolarWinds Orion's breach, that was caught by a FireEye employee who got a log and called somebody. It was a human, but there had to be instrumentation to get there.
So Blake, I don't want us to be all paint the picture. We have a stereotype. Now I know we have a rep to maintain as security people, a little gloom and doom, but I will paint some hope. And part of the need for zero trust is to accelerate our business, to accelerate our companies. And so as we move to dynamic workloads in the cloud, as we move to things like containers, and there's a lot of solid business reasons to do that. Part of the reason we need to look at zero trust is to ensure that we're embedding zero trust principles into those environments to ensure that we enable what we're trying to do. So there's power in that if we automate the creation of the container, and we look, kind of from that asset out, what needs to access it and what are the rules to be able to get there. It's not an all or nothing, but we can automate that. So just as we're automating it to spin it up if we need more resources to drive an application, we can automate creation with the right security architecture to defend it. And then I think the other side of that, to Bob's point, I don't think we'll ever take the humans out of the mix, but we can use machine learning to look at log data, to look at the context of a connection coming in and saying, wow, is this from a device I know? Is this from where that device normally connects from? Is this the type of traffic that normally happens from there? And then either stop it or, put barriers in the way to check it. These are things that happen in the physical world around sensitive environments, and we now have to do this, in the logical world.
Paul, you've inspired me to say something positive too. Thank you. You're right. We shouldn't be doom and gloom. I think along that same point that you mentioned, the example of containerization, there are many parts of zero trust that are about business enablement and acceleration. I think as you get multi-factor authentication solved in a way that users are expecting good, easy use of multi-factor authentication, right? Maybe stop making me find a token that's attached to my keys, and instead make it so that it is a much more natural and easy way to do it, similar to my end user experience with my banking application, for example, my personal banking. So I think as we solve problems like that, we're actually making life easier for our employees and contractors too.
Yeah, they definitely all come together. So the let's shift a little bit in the discussion here when we think about maybe pragmatic things. You gave some examples, Paul, with like containerization, some of the benefits. We talked about identity and some benefits. What are things that are, obviously the landscape of zero trust can go from DevOps, the way you're deploying and destroying containers, to endpoints, to networking, to people and identity and access, and even down to the data, to have that contextuality. How do you, as experts in your field and with what you're chartered to secure, how do you think about prioritization and even practicality of some like initiatives or things that individuals can do?
I'll speak for myself. We've seen a shift with the pandemic, a lot to the endpoint, right? As we've pushed employees out into their own environments. Now we don't necessarily know what controls are in that employee's home. Who else is in that? I mean, is that, what else is on their network? Are there 10 computers on that network and various IoT devices, or is there one? We really don't have control of that, so we have to assume, nothing or minimal. And so, it's really forced us to focus a lot on endpoints, whatever those are, whether those are corporate-owned assets or bring your own device assets, and how those connect to the company applications. And the fact that some of them go directly to a cloud-based application that don't come near any of the company infrastructure. So the old paradigm of everybody connects to a VPN and comes in and kind of marches past the intrusion detection system that we can watch what's happening, that's out the window. And so there's people coming into the company that way. There's people going out to cloud applications directly. People are working from mobile devices increasingly. And so you really have to understand that endpoint and the role that it has in accessing your assets.
Yeah, so endpoint, clearly a critical element in the security and trust factor. Bill, your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like we need to get to analysis and spend a whole lot of time on it, but so I'm not pushing for analysis paralysis, but I think the idea is I'll start with understanding where some of your biggest holes are. And I think that since this came from Forrester, I'll do a unpaid plug for them. A mentor of mine over 10 years ago had turned me to their maturity model assessment. I think any company can use it. It's great. They even have specific ones for identity. They probably have one for zero trust too. But I think as you start looking across and see where you're mature at and where you're not, some of those opportunities will really come up. So if you're going to do zero trust well, you're going to have good asset management. And I know that's unglamorous, but if that's where you're low mature, it's a good place to start. And I mentioned identity, I mentioned multi-factor authentication before. A great place to start because we know it also stops many successful breaches. So, those are some of the areas that I'd throw out, is to start with know where you're bad at, and then fix some of those that are going to put you on the roadmap towards a zero trust future state.
The low-hanging fruit, as I would call it, but great point. Bob, so we talked about identity and those pieces, we talked about endpoints. What's important for you?
Well, for us, it is instrumentation, and endpoints are definitely an emphasis, but there's so many good tools now. I mean, you've got a lot of antivirus products now, anti-malware products now are cloud-based, so you can manage the device from the cloud. You can see their status. You can push updates to them. There's automated patching systems now that are really great tools, again, cloud-based. You can see exactly what's in your inventory and what their patch levels are. And then enforce patching when you need to. If there's some emergency patch comes out from Microsoft, you can push those out rapidly. And then EDR, XDR, there's more terms, but endpoint detection response. They give you actual control over that endpoint and allow you to, like, if there's a malicious process running on a home computer, you can actually kill it from a central console. So detect and kill, even to the point of shutting the machine down. So there's some really good controls there to help enforce.
Yeah, great tools and instrumentation, as you would say. And I think, Bill, you had brought up a point about like notification obligations and things, and those are increasingly getting tighter. And the first thing that's going to happen, you have, without undue delay, to notify. Many clients put in their contracts that you have to notify. When you do that notification, maybe it's 72 hours, maybe it's 24 hours, 48 hours. The first thing they're going to expect is, well, give me all the logs and information about this. And you've got to have good understanding of, to your point, like the basics of what do we have, where's it at. You've got to have good instrumentation. You've got to be able to isolate that type of information as well. So I'm curious, as people think about these initiatives, endpoint related, instrumentation, logging, kind of SecOps related, identity related, and so forth, what does it take to get the company on board with some of these initiatives? When you think about going to your board or your CEO to get budget and approval, when you think about the business users and kind of the end user experiences and getting them on board to the point we were saying before of like, we can't make this like the big negative, oh, security's making us, do blah, blah, blah. Yet again, I feel like I'm trying to run through mud with a chain tied behind my back as well. How has that experience been for you as you think about some of these initiatives?
So I'll jump in there, and as security people, when you walk in the room, you have a big sign above your head that says no, and people are just waiting. They're just waiting for you to open your mouth and shoot them down. So I think the first thing you have to do is really engage with your business. Folks, learn what they're trying to do. Before you start talking about security, learn what they're trying to achieve. I call it the birthday party principle, right? When little kids go to a birthday party, they all go away with a party favor. So they love going to parties. Well, we kind of never change. So make sure that your business people get something walking away from the table, and they're more likely to come back and talk to you again when they see that you have their interests at heart. I'm going to steal from Bill. I think something that's really important is that maturity study. Technologists in general are known for going and spending a lot of money on tools. And if you put this up against, maybe business people are very tech savvy, or maybe they're not. So don't assume that they understand why you're doing what you're doing. It's very important to show that you're a good steward of that spend. And so if you can do a maturity study and benchmark where you are and do it in a very neutral, fact-based way, and then get agreement on, what are the first few things that we're going to work on, and then come back around and show them that you've moved the needle on that benchmark. You've matured in that area, and now it's time for another area. If you can do this and do this steadily, you'll build trust with your executives and your board, and make it more likely that they realize that you're pushing for the company overall and not just kind of out on your own security ivory tower.
Nobody has an ivory tower. We don't know what you're talking about. Bob or Bill, any thoughts on how you've done this internally, the organization? Has it been something you've had to deal with, or?
Yeah, and I can't say that I've gone to the board with a zero trust roadmap and say, hey, here's the, and again, think this is, if Forrester describes it as it's a marathon, not a sprint, I might describe it as it's really a walk that never ends. So I try to bring it in logical bits and pieces, logical segments, and always tie it back to, again, our threat model. What are we seeing? How does this actually prevent attacks? And why are we prioritizing this over that? And having that good stewardship that Paul mentioned. I think also what's been really important to me is to spend a little more time up front at every organization building those positive relationships across the company. And as I think Paul mentioned, really trying to understand how you can help someone else and help security out at the same time. So one of my 5 goals for last year and this year, stated goals, and this is for the department, and this goes, anyone in the company can see it, is number 1 goal, to help the company deliver their most important things, their most important projects. And we name them, we list them, to help them do so securely. And that's our first job, is to do what's most important for the company. And then we get into some other ones. And I think one of my other goals also helps, which is making security easier. And that's how we can point back to different things like, hey, here's those 150 times we implemented single sign-on last year, so that you don't have to remember separate username passwords, and so that you get a more seamless experience as you're throughout your days, you're going from one app to another. So that was I was kind of all over the board there, but I think to me it's really about picking the right things, showing the return, and building the trust internally so that other people have your back and are arguing for the same items that you are, or fighting for the same items you are.
Yeah, makes sense. Has anyone partnered with like the internal HR team, or even maybe marketing team or corporate communications team as part of that initiative to kind of help convey those values and alignment? Or has it been kind of driven out of your own organizational groups?
We have a communications person that is part of the security organization. And her job, she is not a security technologist. And so her job is to tell us when we sound like a bunch of security technologists and what we're saying makes no sense, right? And so helps ensure that we don't put something out that we're like, yeah, that looks great, and everybody else says, I don't know what you just said to me.
Makes sense. Well, awesome. Well, really appreciate your time, each of you gentlemen, in good discussion, and hopefully for our audience today, shed a little bit of some insights into maybe how to prioritize areas you haven't thought about when you think about zero trust, and maybe pragmatic ways to kind of get there. I'll let everyone maybe end today's discussion with just any final thoughts or farewell comments for our audience today.
Well, I did want to say a little bit about passwords, and I think that's a sticking point with many users. The user community is passwords, and one of the things that we implemented was the new NIST standard, which is just basically a long password that never gets reset, and make that users like that. You mean I don't have to change my password? Only if you forget it. Okay, so that's a new standard now, and it's a great, I think it's a great thing. The other thing is some of the new technologies in passwordless. Talked to some colleagues of mine that are actually selling passwordless solutions, and it's quite cool. It's tied to a device, and you don't have to memorize a password anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll advocate for that. I use that for some of my accounts, and it is really nice, but I have no clue what my password is. So that long string that you talk about, no idea what it is. Mm-hmm. Bill or Paul, any final thoughts or recommendations?
I'll say that I think that the need has never been greater. We see the velocity of events that's happening in the marketplace just seems to have no end, right? It's increasing incredibly over the last year and 6 months. But I would say that technology has evolved, and the capabilities to embed security to actually remove friction. Historically, security has put friction into processes, and now in things like zero trust can remove friction, can make security more invisible which increases business outcomes. So I encourage folks to really lean into what is your company trying to accomplish? How can you get out of the way of your employees so they don't really even know you're there? And if you can do that, then you're on a path to success.
Yeah, boy, tough to follow after Bob and Paul's points, because I agree 100% with both of them. I think and I think it's following on the same themes, right? If we can build trust within a security organization and our partners within the company and show that we're good stewards, we're thinking about the end user experience. They understand we're charged with kind of setting the direction for security strategy, but that doesn't mean we ever have to literally make things impossible or make things a hurdle for just typical everyday use. And I think there are ways to get there. And the more we do that, the more trust we have when we do ask someone to slow down for a second.
So everybody is signing up for better experiences by doing zero trust. That was kind of the theme of the recap here, which is true, by the way. No passwords, cert-based authentication. It is a great experience. Well, gentlemen, again, thank you for your time. Awesome discussion here. Thanks to everyone for attending today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.